Hello everybody, this is Jansaurus here. We focus on budget Magic the Gathering, and specifically I am bringing you a Donal Herald of Wings budget commander deck. And Donal Herald of Wings is a 3/3 human wizard for 2 blue, and whenever you cast a non-legendary creature spell with flying, you may copy it, except the copy is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Do this only once each turn. So the thing that's holding Donal back the most is that last little phrase, do this only once each turn. I think he is a very interesting commander, and I will show you a few little fun tricks you can have with him. This is going to be more of a flying tribal deck, obviously, than anything else. And I am very, very excited to get started with this. We're going to start out by rocking out. We got Guardian Idol. It enters the battlefield tap, but it taps and adds a colorless, but it can also pay 2, and it can become a 2/2 golem artifact creature until end of turn. 99% of the time you are never going to use that last ability. You are just going to use it as mana rock. Heraldic Banner, 3 CMC artifact. We're going to choose blue, obviously, and creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+0, and you can add 1 mana of the chosen color. So this is very important. Our main win con of this deck is beatdown, and all of our creature tokens and our creatures are going to be blue. So this will give us a pretty good anthem effect for our win condition. Next up is Midnight Clock. It taps and adds a blue, and then you can pay 2 and a blue, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. At the beginning of each upkeep, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And when the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards, exile Midnight Clock. I love this mana artifact. It's been in, I'm pretty sure, every single blue colored commander deck I've made so far. Just the fact that if you really have nothing in your hand, or if by some means in the deck that you don't have a hand, just paying the extra mana to get 7 fresh cards is just astounding. I absolutely love this card, and it gives you just a little bit more options to play with. Next up is Mind Stone. Taps and adds a colorless, and then you can pay 1 and tap to sacrifice Mind Stone to draw a card. We do have plenty of draw engines in this deck, so I'm not too concerned with the second ability, mostly just here for the first. Next up is Sky Diamond. It enters the battlefield tap, but it can add a blue. And then Thought Vessel. 2 CMC, you have no maximum hand size, and it can tap to add a generic mana to your mana pool. This is a not a pretty expensive. For a mana rock, this is a decently priced card. But I did want to have at least a few instances of you have no maximum hand size, because we are going to be drawing a lot of cards if we get set up properly. Strixhaven Stadium is an interesting one, since we are doing kind of a go wide token strategy. Strixhaven Stadium can just be an additional win con besides beatdown. So if someone is a life gain deck, we can easily just take them out with this. But you can tap and add a colorless to put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. But whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from Strixhaven Stadium. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. Then if it has 10 or more point counters on it, remove them all, and that player loses the game. So there's one thing I definitely want to clarify on this card. You can stack your attack triggers or your damage crit triggers on this to where your if you're, like, let's say at 8 counters and you're attacking with 12 creatures, you can actually take out 2 opponents at the same time if you stack your triggers properly and attack in a smart direction. So it's a more versatile card. So even if you are attacking just 2 people to 1 person, you can still take out that person if you have 8 triggers and then use the other 10 to take out the other person, regardless of life total. This is a very, very interesting win condition, and I'm glad that Strixhaven added it in. We're going to move on to our ramp. Cloud of Fairies, 1 and a blue. And when Cloud of Fairies comes into play, untap up to 2 lands. And then Peregrine Drake, when Peregrine Drake enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands. Since we are more than likely going to be copying these cards and making 1/1 triggers, we get actually to untap 4 lands and 10 lands with just these 2 cards, respectively. So again, since Donal's trigger only affects it once, you do have to be careful with that and have to play it as your first one or first flying creature to get both of these triggers. Just something to look out for. Ornithopter of Paradise has flying, tap, add 1 mana of any color. Just getting pretty much another mana rock for free is pretty nice. Pilgrim's Eye. When Pilgrim's Eye enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So just getting 2 basic lands out of your deck can really be helpful. Hopefully eliminate some of your later crappier draws, and just make sure you hit those land drops. Warden of Evo's Isle. So it has flying, and creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. This isn't necessarily ramp, I understand that, but it is kind of in the same category. All of our creatures have flying, so in a way this is a ramp spell for 30% of our deck. So obviously very, very important, but if you can cast it as your first trigger, then you get 2 of them, and that just adds up to insane value. Kefnit's Monument. Blue creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during their next controller's untap step. So if someone is also on the table being a little bit aggro, this can actually just very surprisingly slow down their game plans very quickly by locking down just key creatures. And then we have Eldrazi's Sky Spawner. It has Devoid that doesn't really come up a whole lot. It does mean it doesn't cost 1 less from Kefnit's Monument. But when it does enter the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool. So obviously, if you cast this first, for your first flying creature, you get 2 free mana rocks, or more or less treasure tokens for this. Honestly, just a very, very good way to just cheat out a little bit of extra value. Now we're going to move on to our card draw. We have, first off, starting with Brainstorm. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Next we have Opt, scry 1, and then draw 1. And then we have Military Intelligence, and whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card. And Reconnaissance Mission, 2 blue, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And it also has Cycling. 90% of the time you're not going to want to play the Cycling, but it's just there for an extra little bit of utility. So Military Intelligence and Reconnaissance Mission, like I said, we're kind of being an attack based beatdown deck with a little bit of tempo in there. So we are going to be attacking with more than 2 creatures, especially since we have evasiveness being a flying deck. So we're going to get just a ton of card draws off of especially reconnaissance mission, but military intelligence is also a very nice early game card draw engine. Verity Circle, 2 and a blue. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. You can feel free to take this card out. I happen to play with a lot of there's this one player who usually wins out of my group, and that's because he's playing combo. One way to slowly prevent or dissuade people from playing combo is just every time they try to go off, you just get a ton of card advantage. So that's why this card is in here. If you do not have a whole lot of combo in your player group, obviously you can take that out for something else. Chart a course. Draw 2 cards and discard a card unless you attacked with a creature this turn. Again, we are kind of an aggressive deck, not necessarily aggro. And then of one mind, this spell costs 2 less to cast. If you control a human creature and a non-human creature, draw 2 cards. I would like to point out our commander is a human, so if you have a commander and any of our other spells or creature spells that we've cast, this is a 1 mana draw 2 cards. And then Open into Wonder. X blue target creatures can't be blocked this turn until end of turn. Those creatures gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So in case if we're going against a reach deck, or if we have an opponent who does have a lot of flyers, this can be kind of our alpha strike in a win condition, while also having the versatility of at least getting us 2 or 3 draws off of the spell alone. So it has a little bit of extra versatility compared to just being an alpha strike win condition right there. Preordained, scry 2, then draw a card. Winged Words. This spell costs 1 less if you control a creature with flying. Draw 2 cards. Cloudkin Seeker. Flying, when Cloudkin Seeker enters the battlefield, draw a card. If this is our first trigger, it's draw 2 cards. Dream Thief. If you are looking at upgrading this deck, I would probably be taking out Dream Thief and going with a card, a similar card, or a bigger payoff for a flying deck. And that's just because when Dream Thief comes into play, draw a card if you played another blue spell this turn. So the way that Herald works is that he only copies your first, or Donal, Herald of Wings, he only copies your first flying creature spell. So you have to play one of our other low mana cost cards and then this to be able to get the double draw trigger. So I would definitely replace Dream Thief if you are looking at upgrading this deck. It's just a little bit too situational. And then next we're going into our flying creatures, and we're going to start off by flying like an eagle. And first off, we're going to start off with Archetype of Imagination. Creatures you control have flying, and creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't gain flying. Obviously, the only creature that we have in this deck that doesn't have flying is Donal. But this is here to prevent another flying deck from actually being able to block, so we can more easily take them out. Next one is Blade Griff Prototype. Whenever Blade Griff Prototype deals combat damage to a player, destroy target non-land permanent that player's choice that one of your opponents control. So this is kind of a political tool. It can never hurt anything that you control, so keep that in mind. But he does get priority. He can blow his own stuff up if he has something that he'd really want in the graveyard, or he can blow up the biggest threat on the board with this that you don't control, or maybe a small utility creature. So it can be a little bit of a political tool on this. And just again, I just want to clarify, I'm gonna stop saying it here. Donald's effect literally gives you so many of these copies to where it just makes it absurd value. Cavalier of Gales. When Cavalier of Gales enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. And when Cavalier of Gales dies, shuffle it to its owner's library, then scry 2. So being able to draw 6 cards and put 4 of them back on top really gives you quite a bit of card selection, let alone the extra scry triggers when it dies. Next one is arguably one of our best cards in this deck, is Curiosity Crafter. First off, you get no maximum hand size, and whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card. So this is actually just leads to an insane value engine just off of that, especially when you get 2 of these on. So you get 2 cards for every single time a token creature makes combat damage. And then you also have the little bit of extra bonus of your maximum hand size not being lost due to a simple removal spell. Makes it a little bit added bonus, but yeah. Diluvian Primordial. When Diluvian Primordial enters the battlefield, for each opponent you may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard, this turn exile it instead. Being able to pick 1 spell completely for free out of anyone's graveyard is awesome. Being able to pick 6 can just probably end you, or just have you win the game right there, or put you so far ahead that your opponents will really struggle to keep up with you. When Reader Sphinx. Whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. Again, all of our creatures have flying, so this can just lead to an absurd amount of draws. We can pretty much find any answer that we need in our deck with this card. Gomazo. Is a defender flying, but you can tap it and put Gomazo and each creature it's blocking on top of their owner's libraries. Then those players shuffle their libraries. So the reason why this is in there is we are being fairly aggressive, but we also need a little bit of time to get out our value engines, get out our commander, and this can really pump the brakes on anyone who is looking at taking you out early through combat damage. Just having the ability to take their biggest creature and put it somewhere in their library really can hold off on anyone attacking you. And that can just give us time to set up our field and slowly gain advantage until we just snowball out of control. Loyal Drake. Flying with Lieutenant. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, draw a card. Again, giving us the potential to draw 2 cards for free. Mole Drifter. When Mole Drifter enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. You can pay for its evoke cast evoke cost, and it's still technically casting it, so you can draw 4 cards for 3 mana. Sani, Eye of the Storm, is our only other legendary creature in this entire deck. When Sani, Eye of the Storm attacks, scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures with flying. This is in here just for the absurd card selection that you can get off of this card. We can probably dig at least a quarter of the way through our library without even trying to find a certain card for any situation that we need. Siren Storm Tamer, flying, pay a blue, sacrifice Siren Storm Tamer, counter target spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. Again, just getting I don't want to say a free counter spell, but at least a counter spell ability, and then having 2 of it for 1 mana is just insanely good. Sphinx of Foresight, 2 blue. You may reveal this card in your opening hand. If you do, scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep, and then flying at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Again, just card selection is just very great, can help us filter our draws, and hopefully prevent us from either getting mana screwed or mana flooded. Sprite Noble, flying. Other creatures you control with flying get +0/+1, but you can tap it, and other creatures you control get flying, or with flying, get +1/+0 until end of turn. So this can be a massive pump spell and easily get us 10, 15 power just by tapping a single creature, let alone if we have 2 of these. Thieving Skydiver, 1 and a blue with kicker X. When Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So this can just either get a Lightning Greaves or a Mana Rock or something for very, very cheap, or if there is something that's actually causing a problem, like if for some reason someone did not win the game with a Paradox Engine, I would very highly suggest getting rid of that with a Thieving Skydiver. The only sad thing is with how Kicker is worded, I'm not sure how the token actually comes onto the battlefield. I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually let you get 2 artifacts, but I could be wrong on that. I'm just pretty sure it just doesn't work like that. And then Tide Skimmer, 3 and a blue. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures with flying, draw a card. Again, we're going to be attacking all the time. And then this is a very interesting win condition in of itself. This is, I believe, the most expensive card in this deck. It is Tidespout Tyrant. It is 8 CMC, but whenever you cast a spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand. This wins games by itself, and imagine having 2 of those triggers every single time you cast a spell. I really do not like putting $4 or $5 cards in my decks. Just kind of defeats the purpose of going budget. But to have a win condition and then double its effectiveness this easy is just really, really hard to pass up. Warkite Marauder, 1 in a blue, and whenever Warkite Marauder attacks, target creature defending player controls loses all ability and has base power and toughness 0/1 until end of turn. This just gets rid of their biggest blockers or their 2 biggest blockers, or if they have an Avacyn on the other field or on their side, now all of their creatures lose indestructible. So it's just a very kind of utility creature to help you get in that extra damage. Windstorm Drake. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. Again, getting another Anthem or Lord effect for your entire army, and then doubling it just creates an insane amount of value in this deck. Deluge. Tap all creatures without flying. Since we're more than likely not attacking with Herald or Donal, Herald of the Wings, this should not affect us whatsoever. But being able to tap everyone's creatures right before our turn can just instantly win us the game if there's someone who has who's in green who has a lot of reach creatures, for example. Favorable winds. Creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. Gravitational shift. Creatures with flying get +2/+0, and creatures without flying get -2/-0. I believe this is the second most expensive card in the deck, but after Tidespout Tyrant. But I mean, it's a flying deck. When else are you going to be able to use this card? Next up, we have Gust of Wind. This spell costs 2 less if you control a creature with flying. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Draw a card. Just a little bit of a tempo play if someone's playing something really, really scary, or if someone played a just a utility creature that you know is just going to be annoying. Just pop it, wait for it to come back next turn, and at least you get the card replaced. Lofty Denial, very, very great counter spell for the early game for this deck. Making your opponent pay 4 is back-breaking in the early to mid states of the game. Next up, we have a little bit of some spirit synergies, since the tokens that Donal, Herald of Wing, the tokens that he creates are spirits. So we're going to start off, or we're going to have a little bit of some spirits in the sky. Patrician Geist. Flying. Other spirits you control get +1/+1. Spirits you cast from your graveyard cost 1 less. I believe the last part of that will never come up in this deck. But just pumping all of our tokens just makes them that much more efficient, and hopefully we can close out the game a lot quicker with that. Shacklegeist. Shacklegeist can block only creatures with flying, but you can also tap 2 untapped spirits you control, tap target creature you don't control. So I know some of our creatures are more utilities and lords, and you might not want to be attacking with them all the time. This way, even their tokens at least get a little bit more advantage and can take out key mana dorks or the biggest, baddest creature right before their combat phase. Supreme Phantom. Other spirits you control get +1/+1. Just another lord effect. Dungeon Geist. When Dungeon Geist enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap as long as its during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Dungeon Geist. Just get rid of a problem creature, get rid of a Blightsteel Colossus, or the biggest threat on the board, and now you don't have to worry about it. It's that easy, and then you can potentially double it up with Donal's effect. So we're going into some of our utility spells now. Next up, we have Aetherize. Return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So this gives us quite a bit of protection in case if we Alpha Strike, got rid of the biggest threat, and someone thinks that they can retaliate against us. We can play this and wipe their board and take them out the turn after, or the third person there, and then while this guy's reestablishing his board, take him out the turn after. So it's just a very, very great way to deter someone alpha striking you. Abjure. Sacrifice a blue permanent counter target spell. This is a great 1 mana counterspell for this deck, especially since we are creating so many tokens. Like, for example, our Cloudkin Seer token, after it comes onto the battlefield and gets us an extra card, it's really not doing a whole lot, so we could easily sacrifice it to pay this cost. Disdainful Stroke. Counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Lazotep Plating. Probably one of my more favorite protection spells in this deck for sure. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn with a mass 1. That's not really that important. But just having the ability to prevent someone taking out Donal or our Tide Spout Tyrant would be just phenomenal on its own. Next up, we have Negate, counter target non-creature spell. Neutralize 1 blue, counter target spell. Run away together. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. So you can choose the 2 biggest threats your opponents control, as long as they're, owned by different people. But this can also be used on our own stuff to get back a Peregrine Drake or another card draw engine, or even our fairies that let us untap 2 lands. Just gives us quite a bit more options than what a usual removal spell is. Confounding Conundrum. This will be the envy card of any green player on your table. When Confounding Conundrum enters the battlefield, draw a card. It already replaces itself. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land card they control to its owner's hand. This, I don't want to say completely negates ramp, because they can tap it before sending it back to their hand, and it gives them a little bit, but this can greatly slow down your green players or your Simic players on the table. Just a very great utility enchantment in general. Arm with Ether. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent. You may return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. Again, just an amazing way to just clear the board while being aggressive. Curse of the Swine. X blue, exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller puts a 2/2 green boar creature token on the battlefield. Just an amazing mass removal spell for this deck, especially since you can take out any key flyers or reach creatures and free your way up for an alpha strike. Karn's Temporal Sundering. Target player takes an extra turn after this one. Return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Exile Karn's Temporal Sundering. So this is a little bit, I don't want to say niche, but it does have a very low requirement of having our commander out or Sani's out on the battlefield, since this is a legendary sorcery. But most of the time we're going to be wanting to have our commander out to get the most out of our deck anyways, so I don't really see this being a negative. If you do not like this card, you can pick up literally any other extra turn spell. I just like the added bonus of potentially bouncing one of our utility creatures back to our hand or bouncing a threat off the board. Raven form, 2 and a blue, exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird token with flying with foretell. Just a great removal spell. The only downside is that it does give them a token with flying, which that means they can block one of your creatures, but honestly, you'll definitely rather be dealing with a 1/1 blue bird token than whatever you are removing. So again, just another great exile removal spell in blue. Stolen by the Fae. X blue blue. Return target creature with converted mana cost X to its owner's hand. You create X 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying. Just remove hopefully the biggest threat on the board, or again a very strong blocker, and it just widens your boards with defenders, so you can just alpha strike for without having to worry as much. And then Mystic Sanctuary. It enters the battlefield tap unless you control 3 or more islands. When Mystic Sanctuary enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. So getting a deluge and then having to access to be able to, at instant speed, tap every other creature on the board twice would just put you over the top with this deck, honestly. Just getting whatever card you need and ensuring that you have that type of card on the top of your deck is just a really, really satisfying way of recursion for this deck. All right, so for value, our TCG player price without shipping is $38. I do not include shipping on my TCG player pricing just because for me, I seem to not have a whole lot of access or success with the cart optimizer. So that's a little bit disappointing. I would love to get a better accurate value for this, but once you hit these higher price card or these higher card amount decks, the TCG player cart optimizers sometimes just never finish loading. I've literally hit cart optimize, walked away from my computer, made sure it wasn't going to fall asleep, and came back over an hour and a half later, and it just didn't. It just never finished loading. Card Kingdom, we got just over $50 at $50.81. And then the average deck price for a Donal Herald of Wings is $410. So we are 1/8 of the price for this deck. Just and I feel like this is a very, very competitive deck for the price that it has. I feel like Donal is a very interesting and pretty unique way of building a flying commander tribal deck. Alright, going into the lore. Donal used to be a devout worshipper of Avacyn. His world was shattered when Avacyn betrayed humanity and then was unmade by Sorin. So he's decided to do a pilgrimage after losing pretty much all faith in the world after that. And he woke up on his pilgrimage to the songs of birds and felt at peace for the first time since Avacyn's betrayal. So I have obviously a few key pictures here. This is Donal in the upper right hand corner, and if you look carefully, you can see that the darker birds are actually physical birds, like normal birds, but obviously these blue ones are the spirit birds that he summons whenever you cast a normal flying creature spell. So that's just a little bit of extra. I love the little flavor that they added into his art just right there. Lower left hand corner is Avacyn after she was corrupted. Obviously this was this was Donald's deity, pretty much. This was his protector, and I don't even have a comparison for what that would be like for us in modern day. It would be like if your like I said, I don't even have a comparison without potentially upsetting a lot of people, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut on that. But just imagine, for if you believe in anything and what you believe in, if your protector just betrayed your entire existence. And then this lower right hand corner, that's Soren Markov. He's the one who created Avacyn to protect humanity, and then he's the one who also unmade Avacyn during when Emrakul attacked. So that's just I just really wanted to just point out the fact of Donald's artwork. It's just a very, very amazing touch to just put that little bit of extra effort into his card art to reflect his his rules text. I just really want to point that out there. All right, everybody. This has been Donal, Herald of Wings. I'm very proud of this deck. I think it will be a very focused commander deck, especially for either $38 or $50, whichever way you get it. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Like, comment, and subscribe if you really want to. You can thumbs down this video if that's what you feel like this video deserved. I completely understand. Any comments and critiques in the comments would definitely be greatly appreciated. And I will see you next week. Thank you guys so much.